Chapter 6 Fighting Lessons. When Marcus and Quintus walked through the tunnel that led from the amphitheater back to the gladiator school, Ranger followed them. Villius met them at the gate. "Why have you been away for so long?" He cuffed Marcus on the shoulder with his rough hand. Before Marcus could answer, Villius' eyes fell on Ranger. "And what is that hairy monstrosity?" "Just a dog. He's a stray," Marcus began. Even though there were plenty of cats around the gladiator school, he should have known that Villius would object to such a big, strange-looking dog. Marcus thought about putting the dog out into the streets, but he couldn't bring himself to leave it, not after what had happened. "He got into the amphitheater somehow and—" He trailed off and glanced quickly at Quintus, silently begging him not to speak of the lion. Villius would be furious if he knew Marcus had abandoned his own duties to work for the animal trainer. Quintus seemed to understand. "The dog has taken a liking to us, it seems," Quintus said, reaching down to pat Ranger's head. Villius grunted. "He'll be taking a liking to your share of the meals if he stays. I have no food for that beast." He gave Quintus a wooden training sword and gestured to the open space at the center of the school. "Now get to your training. Cleto will practice with you today." Marcus looked out at the oval ring. Cleto stood with a wooden sword in hand and a snarl on his face. "He is brutal, but if you move quickly, you will be a match for him," he told Quintus. "But he is strong but slow. When you—" "Are you the trainer now?" Villius interrupted, mocking him. Marcus lowered his head. "Take the dog and go empty the pots." "Come, dog," Marcus said quietly and slapped his knee. Ranger followed him to a very small room with stone walls and a mound of straw in the corner of the floor. Marcus flopped down on the scratchy stuff and started talking, even though there were no people around to answer. Luke did that in his bedroom sometimes, too, especially when he was upset. "I think that he thinks I'm nothing, dog, but I could be a trainer," Marcus said. Ranger pawed at the straw and sat down beside him. Marcus scratched behind his ear and sighed. "I have watched the men come and go for 5 years. I know what it takes to be the best. I could win in the arena. I know I could." He picked up a small stick out of the straw and stood up, holding it as if it were a sword. "I'd hit up here!" Marcus whacked at the top edge of the barracks door with his stick. "It's a blow to the head. Swing lower and you have hit your opponent in the flanks. Strike here, and you take his knees out from under him." Marcus swung the stick at the lower edge of the door. The stick broke in half, and he left the tiny stub of the make-believe sword. The other half went flying into the straw. Ranger bounded after it. He loved to play fetch. Ranger nuzzled the straw aside until he found the stick. He took it in his teeth and trotted over to Marcus by the door. The boy smiled and accepted the other half of the sword. "I thank you, but I fear this weapon cannot be repaired." He tossed it back to the ground, and Ranger pounced on it and brought it back, wagging his tail. Marcus laughed. He threw the broken stick sword. This time Ranger jumped up and caught it in midair. Again and again Marcus threw, and Ranger fetched. It felt good to jump and play, even in the small cell. For a few minutes Ranger could almost imagine he was home in the yard, playing fetch with Luke and Sadie, or chasing after soccer balls at the park. But then the door flew open. Marcus dropped the stick and rushed to lift the pot from the corner of the cell as Villius shoved Quintus into the tiny room. "A poor effort," he declared. "Lock him in for the afternoon. He has not earned his time in this city." Here's a picture. "Bring him a bit of barley gruel for supper, and we shall try again tomorrow." He stomped off. Quintus sank into the bed of straw and buried his face in his hands. Ranger sat beside him. Sometimes when Luke was upset, that helped, but it didn't seem to be helping Quintus. "I should have never sworn the gladiator's oath. I will not survive my first fight in the arena." "You will," Marcus said. He dug through the straw until he found both halves of the stick sword. He kept one and handed to Quintus. "Take this, stand up, and I will show you." Ranger thought they might both throw the sticks for him now. Luke and Sadie did that sometimes. But instead Marcus stood with his stick sword firmly held in a hand. The other hand he held to the side, balancing himself. "The trick is to strike and move before your opponent can strike back," he told Quintus. He poked with his stick and darted to one side before Quintus could react. "Now you try." Quintus swung at Marcus with his stick sword. Marcus saw it coming and easily lunged the other way. "You are too slow that way," Marcus told Quintus. "You must stab with the tip instead of slashing with the side," he demonstrated. Quintus tried again and managed a good stick sword poke at Marcus' shoulder. Very good, Marcus said. When you train, you will learn a series of moves like this. Take care not to follow the practice too closely when you go out to the fight in front of the Emperor. The audience loves a good show. People hate a fight that's played too close to the book. Quintus took a few more jabs at Marcus before his stub of wood flew from his hand. He let out a breath and sank down in the straw to pat Ranger's head. He looked at the door of the barracks and then said to Marcus, "I think I will go to the baths before the evening meal," he said. "Not today," Marcus said. "Vilius has ordered you to be locked in your cell." "Surely you would not want his new recruit to become ill?" Quintus stood and started for the door. "You must not. If Vilius finds out that you have disobeyed, he will be furious." Marcus peered out of the yard. Apollo was fighting Cleto in practice. Vilius shouted for them to stand taller and hit harder. "He will not know that I am gone if you do not tell him," Quintus said. "I am simply in need of a bath, so I might feel like myself again. Would you deny me that after I kept your secret from the amphitheater?" He raised his eyebrows and looked at Marcus. Marcus swallowed hard. It would be a while before the barley gruel was prepared. He nodded quickly. "Well, go, be quick." Quintus slipped out the door and Marcus lowered himself to the straw. He stroked the soft fur behind the dog's ears and yawned. Marcus's legs still felt weak from what had happened at the amphitheater, but now that the lion was locked up again and now that he was safe, he was so very, very tired. Ranger stretched out in a small patch of the sun. Marcus lay down beside him and closed his eyes. When he woke up, Vilius was shouting in his face. "Where is he? What have you done?" Marcus scrambled to his feet and looked around. The sun was low in the sky. He must have been asleep for quite some time. Quintus should have been back long ago, but now he was nowhere to be found. I do not know. He asked only to go to the baths and—" "You disobeyed me?" Vilius pinned Marcus against the stone wall of the barracks. His snarl was every bit fierce as a lion's. Ranger's muscles tensed. He growled low in his throat, but he did not move. He sensed that anything that made Vilius more upset would also make him more dangerous. "You go and you will find him." Vilius's breath was hot and sour on Marcus's face. "And you will bring him back, or you will pay with your life." All right. Chapter 7, The Runaway. Vilius stormed out of the barracks and Marcus sank to his knees. He would never find Quintus. Quintus had lied to Marcus about going to the baths. He had hated this place and fled, and now Marcus was left to pay the price. He buried his face in his hands. Ranger brought him a stick. Marcus didn't look up. Ranger nudged him until he moved his hands and saw the gift. Marcus saw the stick for a second and then dropped it back in the straw. Ranger picked it up again. He wasn't sure what else to do. How could he make things better for Marcus? Ranger gave Marcus another nudge with the stick, but this time Marcus ignored him. So Ranger kept the stick in his mouth. It was Quintus's sword stick. It smelled like Quintus. Maybe Quintus could help. Ranger had found the older boy once. He could find him again. Ranger dropped the stick and sniffed the air. He walked to the door and sniffed again. Quintus's smell was there, with the smoke and the barley soup and straw. Ranger barked, and Marcus looked up. Ranger barked again. He ran back to the stick and picked it up and then ran to the door and pawed at the ground. "You are right, dog. I must go." Marcus stood up and started for the door. He paused to pick up the small wooden stick sword from the floor inside. "I will never find him, but I must go and try." Ranger sniffed the air and started towards the gate to school. Quintus had gone this way. His scent was still strong in the air. Marcus followed the dog out into the streets, where food vendors were calling out, "Honey cakes! Sausages!" The game at the amphitheater had ended for the day. Crowds of Romans spilled out into the gates into the street. There were so many more smells now. Horses, dust, sausage. But Ranger stayed focused on Quintus's smell. When he lost it for a moment in the crowd, he circled back until he found it again. Picture of the market outside the arena. There! Ranger followed the scent away from the school and the arena toward another big building made of stone. "The baths?" Marcus said. Had Quintus told him the truth after all? Marcus was afraid to hope, but the dog was insistent that as it led him past the juggler near the entrance toward the courtyard of the baths of Titus. A man stopped Marcus. "Where is your ticket?" "I'm not here to bathe," Marcus told him. "My master has sent me to find someone." The man let him pass, and Marcus followed Ranger into the large open space. It was full of sweaty, groaning men lifting lead weights and exercising before they went to the baths. The The hair plucker squawked, calling for customers, but Quintus was not there. Ranger could still smell him, though. Quintus had been there, even if he wasn't there anymore. Ranger lifted his nose and led Marcus into a room where men were soaking in the pool. One plunged in and splashed Ranger's legs with cool water. Ranger kept going through the doorway into another room with another pool, and then a third water place where the air was hot and steamy. And here, too, the baths were full of men, but none of them were Quintus. Ranger led Marcus back out to the street. The smoke smell was getting stronger, but Ranger could still pick up Quintus's scent. He held his nose high and kept going. Marcus followed Ranger. They jumped from stone to stone across the road and dodged a cart barreling towards them from the Forum. When they turned the corner, a broken pot came flying out of an apartment window and smashed the stones right in front of them. Ranger jumped back and stepped carefully among the shattered pieces. His paws were already sore and raw from walking so far. "Where are we going, dog?" Marcus hesitated. "The Forum? Quintus would not have come here to the city's center with all the courts and the busy markets. Not if his hope was to escape." Ranger paused, too. He took a few steps back and made a circle. Quintus had come this way, he was sure. But the scent was getting weaker. He nudged Marcus in his hindquarters to get him moving again. They hurried along the stone road past olive and fig trees. They ran past the temple of Jupiter with its tall, brightly colored columns. Marcus searched the faces in the crowds as they passed. None of them belonged to Quintus. Marcus was hungry and exhausted, and soon it would be dark. He was out of hope and out of time. His only chance was to go back to the gladiator barracks and beg for Vilius's mercy. Marcus was about to turn around when a man ran past him to the Forum, and many more followed, all shouting the same thing. "Fire!"